A unicorn is a privately held startup valued at over $1 billion. The term was coined in 2013 by venture capitalist Eileen Lee, choosing the mythical animal to represent the statistical rarity of such successful ventures. What does it take to turn your business into this mythical creature? Welcome to the FerventFour. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? What's up, everyone? I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. And with me today, I have my co-host, Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thanks for joining us. The FerventFour is a weekly show each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business, no matter the climate. Follow along and share your thoughts and journey with us. Use hashtag FerventFour. Amazon was founded in 1994, Facebook in 2004, Stripe in 2009, Impossible Foods in 2011, DoorDash in 2013, Lisa Sleep in 2015. What company are you watching, investing in, or wondering what could be the next dominant global brand? Today, we have Evans McMillion, who for the past 3-ish plus years has been asking herself that exact question. Who's next? But not just asking, she's investing in nurturing startups in the 757 as the executive director of 757 Accelerate. The FerventFour is powered by the SBDC, which helps local small businesses grow through counseling and resources like this show. If you're interested in learning more on how the SBDC can help your business, head to startwheel.org/weekly. Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. What's up, everyone? Hello.
Hey, Zack. Hi, Evans.
Hey, Zack. Hi, Tim.
That was a mouthful to say. Whew. Glad that's over. The hardest part of the day is over. All right, so Evans, I think I know. Maybe it's a secret about you. Maybe it's not. I'd heard this rumor that you were kind of a fitness fanatic, and I believe one morning that I actually saw you with a small group of people running like super early in the morning, like 5:30 in the morning, getting your sweat on. Is it true that you are a fitness fanatic? Just a yes or a no answer.
Yes.
Okay. And what have you learned through fitness that has helped you kind of in your business career?
Ooh, you stole my thunder. I was going to ask the same of you all, but a little bit different. What did I learn? I learned the days that you really don't want to, and it's pouring rain or sleeting or hailing. I used to live in Alaska, or snowing. And you go out there, you get this thing called character points. And I have my own personal bank of character points, and there's sort of a group of people that in my whole fitness career and racing career, we talk about character points. And I think you build them in times when the going is the hardest and no one else is out there. Maybe no one sees your vision, and maybe people say, but you could always do that workout tomorrow, or you could always make that extra call tomorrow. And you build this bank of character points that I think in the rest of your life, you get to take debits out of those, and they pay off. They have sort of an exponential payoff. And that's just sort of a personal philosophy. I can't tell you that I necessarily weigh or measure that, but I can say that when you talk about character points, there's sort of a head shaking of acknowledgement that people who have put themselves out there and really been uncomfortable and kept going, they sort of get that internal meter.
Is that line character points? Did you steal that from someone, or did you come up with that yourself? Because I like that.
I don't know. I always said, I think you get extra points. And then my kids said, what kind of points? And I said, I don't know, the character kind that you can't really measure.
I like that.
That's cool. I do too.
I don't know if you know this about Tim. I feel like I bring this up every show, but he's run something like 2,100 straight days, at least 2 miles, and there's a ton of character points in there. And so the bridge between fitness and doing the things that you don't want to do on the worst days, it's really interesting because oftentimes that happens in the business world, right? Where people will say, from a fitness perspective, oh, it's too windy, it's too cold, I'm not supposed to go outside, it's too hot, whatever. In the business world, it can be something along the lines of, I don't have money, I don't have a rich uncle, I don't know how. But those are all excuses, and this character points is something that I think is so incredibly valuable that more people need to implement. And so how did you start getting into fitness? And then let's parlay that into business. How did you start to copy or replicate some of that mindset into the business world?
So I will definitely say for me, and it's sort of humbling because we're all, sort of marathoners or ultra people or distance people or Ironmanners. I can't take credit for that. But I would say I figured out pretty early that athletics and fitness was going to be my currency and my superpower and maybe my language to relate to other people. I was one of those people that was like a heavy kid and grew really, really big really early. And so physicality was a thing for me always. And so for me to try to find a way where that became a superpower and not a liability was sort of like a constant drumbeat. And I came from a pretty athletic family and they were all team sport people. So I played team sports all the way through college. And then halfway through college, I sort of was riding the pine so much. I was like, wow, I bet I could figure something else out here. This is an awful lot of time for never getting to play. And I then quit and started thinking, what else can I do? And I'd never done anything that wasn't in a team. So that's when I started running for the first time. And then I ran my first marathon. And then I ran several after that. And then I started doing endurance races of all kinds. But I'll say, I think, for me, the question of how did I get there? I think it was that was always a really comfortable currency for me. And especially as a woman who was really like a heavy question asker, really sort of forthright with my opinion. I'm from North Carolina, like being Southern, that's not always the preferred currency for a female. And then I had this, like, when you met me, I had this tremendous physicality kind of early. It was like, how can I make that into something that is, not a liability, but kind of a superpower? And, I don't think as a younger person, I would have ever used these terms, but I think older, it's a little bit like a force to be reckoned with, like hard to dismiss someone who can hang athletically. And then I think there's a lot of recognition of the same character traits. Like we started talking about character points. Those are sort of intangibles in both business and in athletics that people find you, sort of reliable. They find you someone who's not going to quit when it gets hard, that kind of stuff. I think there's just this underlying acknowledgement of, I see that in you and I recognize that in myself. Or if I don't, I would like to have that aspect on my team, because that's how we get more things done. We can motivate more people to do more than they thought they could. So hopefully that answers your question, but that is a lot of what we do in the team building part of accelerator work. Is we work on the people first, because the businesses won't succeed without the people.
Okay, so having a baseline, I was waiting for you too. I was taking that. So having a baseline, I think, is something that a lot of people don't think about first, right? Is they do tend to just want the end result, or they don't realize that they need to create a habit, to create a baseline, to understand, so that when things are a little out of whack, they can do that next thing, right? And so it's I think of it a lot like from a sports perspective, where I don't know, it's just dribbling a basketball is like dribbling a basketball, right? And so that's what you're trying to do in business, is you're trying to create those foundations so that those individuals that you guys are accelerating and mentoring have the foundations ready, so that it just rolls with the punches, if you will. And so give me an example. Well, actually, let's do this. What is 757 Accelerate?
Okay. We need to go back to that, and Tim looks like he has something to add here too. So I hate to be such a chatty Cathy, but
no.
Okay. So what is 757 Accelerate? I guess what I want to say first of all is that the accelerator itself is one of many resources. So I just want to put us on the map of, there are many, many contact points, on-ramps, places where entrepreneurs can go. 757 Accelerate is one, and we do a 12-week selective, intensive, mentor-driven, kind of milestone-based program where we give $20,000 to the between 5 and 8 companies that are selected each year, and that's without taking any equity. And then we try to wrap the most promising founders, the most eager, those who are making the most progress and just need some support to get to the next level, to accelerate their growth by wrapping them in resources. And when I say resources, I mean making sure their legal house is in order, making sure they understand and that their financial house is in order, making sure they have a baseline for business acumen. And I don't mean I mean sort of startup business acumen, which I think for those of you listening who understand the difference between ongoing sort of traditional Main Street businesses and startups, while they have a lot of the same needs, and I feel like we can help there too, there is sort of a startup vocabulary and expectation and things that people will assume that you can converse with frequently and comfortably. So we take that 12-week program. We have legal, we have financial, we have marketing, we have sales funnel building, we have how do you build a replicable sales process? How do you price your product in the right market? We're looking for, like, the people who do the best are companies who are past sort of the back of the idea napkin stage into a little bit of at least deep customer discovery with an idea that they can articulate that's starting to resonate with people, and they need help. If we talk about the progression, and again, I generalize, but sort of the ideation part, then the validation part, then the sort of then the validated part, and trying to build your processes, and then the scaling part. If you think we're the best at the validation into validating. So we help companies get the basic business acumen and then all of the supporting resources that maybe they know or don't know they need, everything from how do you use a CRM. And we have some, sort of superpowers within there. But I think that's sort of what 757 Accelerate offers, along with the $20,000. Then we go on a investor roadshow around the state of Virginia and into Raleigh. And we present our companies and we work on their pitches for the last 3 weeks. And we present them to somewhere between 45 and 60 investors around the Mid-Atlantic to try to help them raise that initial capital. We also support them for the companies that are more sort of in a grant, SBIR, SDT, where we connect them there. And we try to get them to that early pre-seed capital to get them to the place where they can then be validating, finish validating, and then try to scale.
One question I have is in light of everything that's happening with COVID. You had a company that's doing really, really well, and now they're in a situation that they hit the brakes. Has it been determined in terms of the application process? What is that going to negatively impact a company? Are you all pivoting on your end to this is what we have found and we're going to help you get through that? I'm just curious where you are in your process of dealing with the situation that we're
COVID impact, right? Well, yeah. So for starters, I want to say, we are always thinking about founders. And so we'll go back to this in a little while, I hope. But sort of when we talk about the superpowers of one of the things that I feel like 757 Accelerate does really well is sort of investing in the founders coming alongside and making sure the people are strong. But one of the things I can say in response to what we're doing about COVID is we've worked really, really hard to double down on our support for our 11 alumni companies. So we can go into that more and sort of the advice we've given them and how we try to connect them to each other and the resources. But we also belong to the Global Accelerator Network, which is called GAN, and they have 120 of the most successful international accelerators. And we have these weekly calls. And it's been really interesting to try to parlay companies in other parts of the country that are ahead of us in terms of application pipeline. So are the applications down? In some worlds, you would think if you're giving $20,000 of non-dilutive capital and all signs are pointing towards the pre-seed and seed stage capital markets being closed for the most part to companies that are not already in revenue, then the answer is, what are we, we don't expect that companies in the last, that they're, the question that we always ask is what progress, what are the highlights you've in the last 6 months? We definitely expect the answer to that question to be different from last year. Mm-hmm. There is not enough data yet to see whether or not the applications will be up because people are all of a sudden $20,000 per company in revenue looks really good because they're otherwise not making that revenue and they know they have, say, a weak sales process or they don't have a great investor network, and then you start that conversation and we can be impactful for them there, but they would otherwise consider themselves past acceleration. So we don't have enough data yet to tell you whether or not we think that the application pool will be more sophisticated or more mature companies or less so, but we definitely expect the answer to what are the most important milestones you want to tell us about progress you've made in the last 6 months. We expect that conversation to be really different.
Right.
And I also think there's no doubt that we have to be mindful of the calculus between the nice to have, what people call the nice to have versus need to have, in startup speak, it's the vitamin versus the painkiller. The compelling need for your business or the compelling need for your offering and or your market going forward, I think is a really important question to be asking. We have some companies in our alumni group, and we've spent a lot of time with them trying to figure out how to tweak their offering, how to talk to a different customer set, how to be aware and not pretend like, oh, this didn't happen to me. I mean, it happened to all of us. So there's a lot of humility in there, and then there's a lot of agility in trying to help these guys figure out, like, for example, Troopster is one of our alumni companies, and she was sort of frozen thinking the kinds of people that buy care packages for military are people whose income was just dramatically affected. And so what we did was help her, we had a board meeting, we had a conversation, and one of the questions was, could Chelsea just pivot and start selling to healthcare workers? Because so many people want to do something for a healthcare worker without having to leave their home. And in a weekend, I called her on a Thursday night. By Monday, I had done a bunch of research. She'd done a bunch of research. She worked on different suppliers. And by Tuesday, she had an offering and a GoFundMe campaign. So there's that kind of success happening for a company that's like an e-commerce company that could switch what they're doing. We're just trying to see how people and or help them try to make that transition. But we do expect that conversation to be different.
It seems like the company in the portfolio that is one of the companies that's doing very well in the portfolio is SVT Robotics. And they've really, it seems like, looked at not just today, but years in the future with some of their analysis of the market and where they see things going. And so it seems like a lot of companies build businesses for right now and today and not necessarily thinking about the future. Right. And so I believe that while what we're going through is absolutely terrible, a lot of the shifts that are happening are kind of your traditional bell curve where the people on like the last adopters, kind of quadrant 3 and 4, are moving and shifting and being forced into doing things that they wouldn't have done before. And so it seems like with a company like SVT Robotics, they're in prime position and ready, and we're forecasting kind of what the future is going to look like. It's going to be very heavy warehouse based without individuals necessarily doing stuff. And so how do you guys see like what's good now as something that you want to be in, but really also looking at, okay, what does 5 years look like from now, 10 years look from now? Because a company like that, I think if you look at the next 10 years, I mean, I believe that you're going to see Walmart's completely get rid of their retail situations, right? Where you're not going to have consumers go in there whatsoever, and they're going to become warehouse hubs. And what you're going to see is the issue from the last mile stuff that everyone's have is you're just going to have drivers. You're going to have the consumer go in, pick up their stuff, which is already happening loosely, right? And you're never going to have a consumer go in to the actual Walmart again, because that's just going to be the new norm, right? And so how do you guys look at companies that are doing something that seems so out of line right now, but really is going to become the new protocol, if you will?
So I think a really good question. I think one of the things we see when you talk about the need to have, nice to have, right? The need to have is how, if you take retail, which is the consumer section that you were talking about, consumer goods, anything that can be picked up needs to be transferred to the actual user. So I would say one of the things that's interesting about SVT, which by the way, super successful, really great story. Hats off to Tim Ryan for referring them to 757 Accelerate, and also recognizing that they had a great superpower early on and had deep business acumen, really shallow startup acumen. And Tim is wise enough to know that that's what they needed. And that's what they'll say about their experience at the accelerator, was we knew what we knew about growing a business was in a traditional business where we were just really trying to squeeze profit out of an ongoing. how do you take that first lift? They also saw what they know about the logistics and transportation, which is the reason Amazon, for many reasons, was beating everybody and eating everyone's lunch was because they have no people, right? They have robots doing all that, but they invested in all of their own robot hardware and software. There are tons of robot manufacturers out there, really big gap in the software to get the armed robots, the pick, pack, and ship thing done in an automated fashion. And they tell a great story about the 2-year on-ramp to try to actually get people to integrate those systems. That has now compressed tremendously. They're in a great position. They're going to be flooded with demand at the end of this because now, if there is a TJ Maxx at the end of this, the reason they're going to die or maybe hold on is because they don't have any e-commerce. All that stuff, there's going to be so much pressure to do that. And also that unused capacity for robots is going to be, you want the robot to be doing as many pick, pack, and ship pulls as they can. So one company is going to own a certain amount of capacity for a logistics and warehouse. So also trying to maximize that capacity so that you can do sort of like the Airbnb idea for robots and logistics and software. So I think anything there is going to be incredibly impactful. And also any of the user interfaces that makes grocery store shopping. I mean, how many people had never, ever ordered their groceries? And now they're never going back to the stores. Why wouldn't you? But
that's my point, right? Is people look at these things and say, hey, this will never happen, when it's like, actually, it has been happening. You just haven't seen it.
You just haven't done it, right?
Right.
But I think that one of the problems with that is anyone who has the plugin where that makes that a lot easier for people, any of those will be singles and doubles. They will not be, Cowboy Ventures unicorn. Those will be singles and doubles, but we need a lot of those too, right? A lot of good singles and doubles businesses. So then I would say, I also think anything that is focused on higher ed is bleeding and hemorrhaging. Anything that increases and takes all the friction points out of delivering education, certifications. This is a group of people that had a massive head of steam. They were going to graduate in the best economy in 50 years, and now there's nothing. So anything where they have a long-term view of where education is going to be both value add to the institutions that need to drive their revenue. So data for yield, for admissions, and for people who actually graduate and who end up paying back their loans, any of those platforms, I think are going to have a really good long decade run because there's these, each of these economic units that is a student are woefully behind in any of the work to try to maximize each of those economic units and get the content to the maximum number of people and try not to be left holding an unpaid tuition bill and try to link up the people who run out of money and after their sophomore year and then they end up not graduating. That looks good for the universities too. So I keep thinking those are the ways to any of those on-ramps I think will be incredibly impactful. And then I also think any of this work, like now there's so much free educational content right now because everyone's at home. There's a ton of pressure to get four-year institutions to fight for their value. So any data, any sort of pivot, any way that they can become acknowledged, maybe more of the apprenticeship model, getting people to work and proving their value, any of those, sort of 360 offerings, both software, people, some of that stuff has to be done hand-to-hand combat, right? So we have a company that's upskilling and connecting Latinx and African-American young people to jobs because those diversity numbers don't go down. The need for corporations, but they have a terrible time getting skill-ready people who fit their goals for diversity. So that's a platform where they have an AI where they're trying to get people through the wicket of certain certifications, a better resume, better interview skills, and they can use this chatbot thing they call Carmen AI that's getting more and more sophisticated to try to help these guys. It's a company called Forefront that we accelerated last year. And they're down in a Cox accelerator in Atlanta at Techstars trying to dig into how to make that AI more robust. So those are examples of just quick, industry trends that I see that anybody who has a piece of that puzzle, and again, I'm always a fan, I love the unicorn, but I also think based on the stats that you opened with, right? The singles, doubles, and triples, we can make a heck of an economy in Hampton Roads by doing those too.
Well, I think historically, just because a company worked a certain way, that does not mean that you shouldn't innovate and keep up with it. And Jim Collins, a great author, has written multiple times about those specific things and how people, I don't know if you have written or read any of his books, but like he talks about, I think one of them is called How the Mighty Has Fallen. And a lot of it is how like they didn't innovate, right? Or a company innovated too much. And so there's an interesting kind of paradigm shift in there where it's like, okay, we need to innovate, but you don't always need to innovate a lot. Like I jokingly say this, like, you know, McDonald's and Chick-fil-A are the exact same company. One of them just says thank you a lot more than the other. So, but that's a piece of innovation. Right. And so people overthink innovation in some of that stuff too. And so I think that can be an interesting topic. If you are an interesting kind of thought through all of this is how much is too much innovation and how much is not. So.
Right. Yeah.
Tim?
One of the things that we've danced around a little bit that I know from my end I'm always pushing is the coachability aspect. So we talked about from the athletic side that if you're not following some sort of plan or you're not being able to be coached, then you're not going to hit your goals. And the same holds true with business. How important is that to the founders that apply to 757 Accelerate? And do you have the conversation day one that, hey, you're accepted into our accelerator, you need to be coachable. If not, you know, there's negative aspects to that. So I'm just curious what your take is on coachability and how that plays a part in your accelerator.
That is such a great question. And I love that one because I feel super strongly about the human aspect of entrepreneurship. And I feel like, you know, like I said, one of the things we think about a lot is our goal is to come alongside the founders. But there has to be something to come alongside, some consistency, some set of values, some ability to describe, you know, sort of what motivates you and why you do what you do. And so I would say coachability and the ability to be flexible and give and take and interact. I mean, sometimes people think they're a great salesperson because they talk all the time. And I would say arguably the best salespeople are the people who listen about 60% of the time and troubleshoot about 20 and then talk about 20. So I would say the coachability aspect is the number one thing that we talk about in our selection process. It's the reason that we do personal interviews of the last group because there are some great companies in some really exciting and interesting markets. And we talk to them and we have an interview with them and they either push away any question they don't want to answer or they're quite bombastic when anyone asks them a probing question. They take it like the difference between someone asking you a question and questioning you personally. So those kinds of things, like the open learner, the person who realizes that a good deal of building a startup, because lifting is something off the ground, the biggest, heaviest lift is the first one. And then a ton of that's going to be on how much were you able to listen to your customers' demand. I mean, very much to what Zack was saying, like not just today and tomorrow, but where is it also going? And being okay with the fact that you're going to have to change. I mean, I was so hard on myself at the beginning of this. I was like, God, I don't know that we have enough to help the founders. And a friend said to me, God, Evans, you didn't plan for a global pandemic. You're super bad at your job. And I was like, okay. All right. I hear you. You know, you're being, she was like, could you just be a little less harsh on yourself? But I can relate to that, right? Like wanting to sort of have asked the right questions and thought ahead and been a good planner. But the truth is all of this is going to be unexpected. I mean, we talk a lot about the coachability as the person who signs up to take the body blows that comes with entrepreneurship repeatedly. And we always laugh and like, they get back up and they're like, oh, that sucked. What's next? But not because they didn't think it was a body blow. It's just because they're sort of like, that was part of the plan. We knew that this was going to be, you know, a stick in the spokes of my sales for the next 6 months. And so I think the coachability, the ability to talk about that, the ability to be pressed on testing your assumptions. Like, you know, you have the really confident founder who comes out and it's like, everybody needs this and I just know it. And it's because I needed it. And there's a lot of people like me and the market is everybody. And so any other questions? And you're sort of like, yeah, I actually have a whole lot of questions. And as soon as you start asking them, they feel like they're being questioned again. Like, you know, that's part of it is to say, I can't wait to answer your questions. And the people who are sort of excited about what you might ask them lean forward instead of being like, I don't want to do this anymore. All of that stuff It's a contact sport, growing a business and getting a customer and getting an investor. And all that stuff really plays into your coachability. And look, you may not like what we have to say, but the most important thing is that in 24, 48 hours, you come back and you're like, I listened to what you said, or I listened to what that mentor said. And I don't agree with that, but it did teach me this following thing. And can I follow up with them and ask them that question? That's the kind of engagement. Nobody should be telling you how to run your company, but that information is critical, and your ability to take it in and use it at least to help you inform and put some discipline around the decision and the direction you choose to go. That's coachability. That's all anybody can ask you.
Is there some sort of self-assessment that someone can do to figure out? Is there a self-assessment that someone can do to figure out if they're coachable or not? Because I think there is kind of a fine line between being cocky and coachable, right? Where they want to tell you about how something is going. Yeah. But sometimes that could be perceived uncoachable.
Yes. And I think part of it is assessments. I mean, we have some business assessments, but I would say there's a couple of interesting personality assessments. And that's one of the things that I think is, I referred to this earlier, but one of the things we do at 757 Accelerate for the whole first week, we do 5 full days of diving into each founder's strengths. We teach them how to lean into those strengths. We give them a bunch of examples. We then do role playing. We then do the strengths-based leaderships. We talk about their leadership styles. Then they have to diagram the people on their team and figure out how to work with the different values and the different strengths that people have. So that at the end of that, and when we see them all during the time that they're in the accelerator, sort of leaning into the strengths, like what we would call overusing them. And that can lead to, like you said, sort of a defensiveness or a being cocky or a just frankly not listening. Even if you don't like it, you just listen and you're sort of like ask clarifying questions. So I would say there's a couple. I mean, one of them is the strengths leadership test that, and you really figure out what your strengths are. And then the idea is, well, you need to work on some of your weaknesses. You really lean into your strengths because that's when people are at their finest and are the most in flow and performing at their highest. So a lot of times we've had founding pairs and we've done some strengths work with them, and we've figured out that really their roles should flip-flop, because the things that a COO does is really more detail-oriented and execution-oriented, and this person really, really, really is a visionary. And so we've talked about some of those roles and switching around teams, but we try not to have like a baseline litmus test for a certain kind of founder, but it's, some basic things like, do you listen? Are you able to take in information? Can you answer the questions? Is there an authenticity to your passion for what you're doing? And when someone asks you a question, do you actually answer it even if you don't like the answer? So those are some basic things that I would say can get you kicked, sort of make it really difficult for us to want to bring you into this very intimate environment for 12 weeks. But as far as like a type of founder that's okay, I think that for a host of reasons, there are, diamonds in so many different shapes and sizes. And I feel like we've had founders that really, really surprised us from the sort of initial veneer to the depth and strength that they had once we dug in with them.
What about the opposite side of that, where someone is too coachable, that they end up not being able to push their vision forward because too many people are coaching them?
Yep, I've had 2 of those. And it was every single mentor session they went to, it was like they had just met the Messiah. And it was like, whatever that person said is it. I've got to do that, even if it was 180 from last week's person. And, what that requires is that's why there's a little bit of the consistency of having a staff at the accelerator around that just watches the progression, and you have to bring them back. And that's why that first week of what's your why? Why do you do this? What does success look like for you? When are you the happiest? What gets you up on the worst days? We go back to that and we say, okay, how does this fit with your vision for where you're going? And, how are you going to execute on that? And is that authentic to you? Like, can you sell that story? Or is that just a successful business person story you want to adopt? Because they're very different in the execution, at least from in my humble sort of, I know other people have been at this a lot longer. That's just my humble opinion.
Our guest last week, Chris Sheffield Hill, said something along the lines of, I asked him a question on who is pushing too much that they're giving during this time from a commercial perspective. And he said, who was doing that before? And that's a good gauge to figure out, like, was giving in their kind of mission before or not? And so I think that's an interesting way to look at it. It's like, okay, like if you were always in kind of that giving kind of mode, then continue that, but don't just start marketing yourself to market now because you're giving during, tough times. And so I think that's kind of in line with what you're saying. And I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. I also would like to say, I really think we work with people on change and improving. And I really try to give people a really broad, they can change. Now, people don't, their bedrock doesn't change, but as long as what they're trying to do is within the scope of understanding and reason from where they started, I think we're always, I want to encourage people to learn and change and evolve and improve. And so I would say, yes, and things like a pandemic, when you're all of a sudden at home alone for all this time, and you're sort of like, wow, this really tells me about what kind of community I've built for myself. And going forward, the gift I'm going to give myself is to do a better job. 10 degrees by 10 degrees by 10 degrees, 2 more calls, 5 more thank yous, whatever it takes. And I think those little changes, it's like the first time you decided not to be, in my case, like the roly-poly kid everybody thought you were. It was like 6th grade, and I ran my first mile, and I was like, I think I even didn't believe I could do it myself, because I feel like I thought of myself the way other people thought of me, and I started running a mile every day before school because I was like, I have to be something other than what I've let myself, heard about myself. So I would say those little incremental changes, like if somebody uses a pandemic to suddenly find community and find give before you get, like, put me in line cheering for them.
Right. So we see, so Connor Swain has a question, and he wants to know, do you have any book or resource recommendations for people in the entrepreneurship/startup world? And I was curious of the same thing. Is there a book that you give the cohorts on day one?
There are a whole bunch. I send them a reading list, and I'm happy to share it with this group. I love the E-Myth. I love The Secrets of Sandhill Road. There's a couple of others that I don't have my list in front of me, but I'm totally happy to share with your group and put out there any of these books that I really enjoy. I also think, right to what we were all talking about before we got on, but The Power of Habit is a really, really powerful book. You can get the gist of it pretty quickly, but then, if you're a believer in the power of setting small habits and making small changes leads to really big life changes. And I think sometimes founders need a structure because it all comes at you so fast. And I think if you go to The Power of Habit and you try to figure out, like, what's the 1 or 2 things for us that I want to change? A lot of them need to come from the inside. And when you make the personal changes, it's reflected in the way that you treat your team, the way you treat your community, the way you listen to your customers, the way, the kind of person you can become. And I'm super, this past week in the GAN, which I talked about, that it's an incredible resource. I can't say enough about the Global Network. But what they did this past week was a founder wellness call. And they just started with the idea that this moment, being a founder is always hard, but right now, it is built-in loneliness, it is built-in pressure, it is built-in stress, and the ability to wrap yourself and your own identity into that of your company so that if this company fails, I fail. I think that is one of my sort of personal whys of why we spend the first week at the accelerator. A lot of people have been like, this is so touchy-feely and lame. I can't believe you do this for 5 days. One of those founders hasn't come out and said, it was my favorite part. And I think it's because, in the end, the tools that you bring to the table are the ones, a lot of people can tell you about this great replicable sales process, but if you have this personality habit that always gets in the way, like if the answer isn't the one you want, your answer is to like lash out at the customer or to question whatever. I'm just giving an example of something I had to deal with this week. And we can give you the best process in the world. You can have the best product in the world.
Right.
People will never call you back because the first interaction was such a nightmare. So taking friction out of the sales process starts internally with your self-awareness about how you come across, about how you communicate with people, about how you shut up and listen or don't. And I think those things are some of the most powerful tools. So while I love some of these books, I think that kind of direction, you know, things like StrengthsFinder, things like trying to figure out what your superpowers are, and then you're going to be best when you're using those most. And so seeking situations and tweaking your communication styles to acknowledge that sometimes, you know, you're a data person or you're a vision person, right? You don't let data get in the way of a good decision, or don't do anything without data. Those things can get in your way, but that self-awareness is really important.
So some of my favorite books about kind of the business world have really nothing to do with about business, but they have to do with this one word called grit or resiliency. And I think that's kind of what we're alluding to here, right? And so I was jotting down after Connor asked that question, but like there's the first book that I like to talk about is this book by Scott Jurek about how he ran the Appalachian Trail. And so it's a story about him and his wife who crewed it for him. And so they did 2,184 miles in like 46 days or something. And it's an incredible journey of him and his wife doing something that's basically impossible, yet they did it. And then there's a book by David Goggins. If no one's ever heard of David Goggins, he's just crazy. You should listen to him. Jesse Itzler, who is a great guy in general, but he's married to Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx. And so these two together is really interesting. And then about this time last year, I'd read Ronda Rousey's autobiography, and it was before she actually had lost in UFC. And it's really, really interesting because while she has a ton of grit and resiliency, it really shows how the leadership of her parents really helped form her into becoming a huge champion, which I think was really interesting. And then a book that I finished yesterday from someone who you might be a fan of is Coach K. You went to Duke, so I figured you have some sort of love for Coach K. I would hope so. But it's a book about how he defines, I think, 40 or 50 different words. And something that's really, really interesting that I had heard from some of his teammates a few years ago was this concept of next play. Are you familiar with that concept? Mm-hmm. So basically it's like, hey, something good or bad happened, but it doesn't matter. You move on to the next play. And that's what's the most important thing. Right. And it's like, oh, I just lost. Okay, well, next play, right? Let's quickly move on. And so is that kind of concept of yes, you had a call that went bad, but quickly analyzing and figuring out why. Like, how do you teach that type of grit and resiliency to founders who maybe have never gone through this in kind of the acceleration platform?
That is a really good one. I would say the way that we think about this, and I do want to talk more about the accelerator because I'd love to think that we could spur some applications and or some founder connections. So get people to apply and or get people into resources that can really help them. The next play idea, I think one of the things that is super helpful about the way that we try to help and ICAP and Bob Smith and that group has really helped us to give a structure around customer discovery and customer interviews so that when you're going out to ask the questions of your customer, or you're going out to do what you hope is going to be this killer sales call where you come away with your first paid pilot or whatever, it gives you a structure and a framework to ask the same questions of everyone. So it's sort of level setting, and it's focused on data, and that data is your friend, and that data is the secret sauce to getting inside a customer's head, right? To get inside the market and the trends and the kinds of decision makers and how do they decide? What do they decide? What makes them decide? And you get some objectivity and some structure around being able to move away from the emotional piece of having gone to that meeting and not getting the paid pilot you were hoping for. The question is, what did I learn from that? And if we take and can train you sort of reflexively to take each one of those customer interactions, make sure you come out with some objective data that you can compare to all the other ones, rather than the only thing that was valuable about that was that they said no. So I think structure, teaching data, giving you a place to put that data, tease it away, and feel like every interaction gives me the opportunity for more data, which will make me better at my job and make me closer to my customers' needs or refine my offering or realized that price was in my way.
So Joe Weaver has a question. He wants to know what excites you most about Hampton Roads.
Well, I would say, selfishly, it is seeing the success of some of our alumni, like my friend Joe Weaver, and like the team at TP and Troopster, and and all 11 companies that we have accelerated. And then I would say, sort of less selfishly, I'm really excited about the possibility that some of these companies that have really been through it, and I would say Joe and I have been through some tough times together, that the ability for them to be successful and to be great examples, and they're so open and willing to share their experience. So my goal for the next, when we can get together and even sort of virtually, is to try to share some more formats that you guys have done a great job of creating, virtual formats where they can do some Q&A, even in a sort of anonymous format where people won't feel stupid asking those questions. But the teams that we've accelerated, we've really dug in with them personally, and they've really shown some amazing growth, and they've had some super crappy times, and they're so willing and open and brave about sharing those times. And I think that gives, like, back to the founder wellness, but also helping you build that grit, because I think some of the most challenging moments to your grit are really emphasized by the low. You feel like you're doing something wrong. And when you can pull away and realize you're part of a larger story of people who have had either similar body blows, more or worse, doesn't matter, but your body blow is a real one, but that's part of this journey, and that you too can sort of, I always think of the weeble wobble, like wobble back up and say, what's next? So I think, Joe, seeing those guys succeed, bring reputational stardom to the area with big companies and big names and technology offerings that can be offered in a bunch of places, but then also the approachability and connectivity that having successful founders around will give to other entrepreneurs to look at them and say, I want to do that.
And Joe is one of the founders of one of the companies that you guys accelerated, ARIO, A-R-I-O, I don't know, .com. I don't know what the URL is, but something like that. If you type in A-R-I-O, you'll find it in there. So let's.
Connor asked one question, though. There was a tip for founders regarding meeting people and networking in COVID-19. Is that something you guys want to talk about?
Sure.
The direction to go. Okay. So I think one of the things I've seen a ton of is everybody's ready to do the Zoom. I would say share. I think all this time about the way to connect with people is to spend this time putting out their content, making it available, and then trying to figure out who can you help? Who can you give to before you get, because this is a moment when not a lot of people are going to write checks. So I was thinking about the other day, like, who have I had on my list to thank that I haven't done a great job? And I reached out to one of these guys whose book I read, that Chris Hively, who wrote this book called Building the Fort. And probably 4 times in the last 5 weeks, I've said, okay, what do I have around me? What can I use with the resources that are around me? Because there are no new ones coming. And so I was thinking, oh my God, I got to tell Chris that I've used that so many times. What could I do? Could I offer to write a book review for him? Could I offer to do on Amazon or something? Like, what could I do to just simply say, not just thank you, but like, how could I give you something because you've given me something? And it's not just because he gave me something. It's just that I don't think I've said thank you enough. So I would say in connecting with people, it's like, how can I try to think ahead about someone's problem? Like, try to connect with them and ask them, what are they working on? What's in their way? And see if you can find a way to leverage your own superpowers, your own network, your own products. And, people like to be asked their opinion. And I think more than anything right now, people want to be reached out to because there's so much isolation. And so if you're reaching out by saying, I'd like to, with the framework being, how can I give something to you? How can I remove an obstacle? I think that's a great way to get someone's attention.
Well, and I think in that specific case, like, it's unfortunate that it took you that long to do that, to reach out to him as something that you knew he was there and he's helped you so many times. But like, that's something that people should be implementing good times and in bad times, right?
Totally.
They have this network, right? And so it's like, it's not about building this new network. It's like, hey, here's your low hanging fruit of people, like, go after it, because this is these people are, you've already built the relationship with them. Why go after and spend your attention on things that you don't know if are going to work when you already have this great relationship with someone, even if you haven't talked to them in months or years? I mean, it's still, that relationship has already been there. You just need to nurture it a little bit more.
And that's one of the things we've told a lot of the alumni founders and sort of some of these resources we've given to them is, you know, the most important customer to your business is the one you already have. So if what they're saying to you is, I can't pay for the next 90 days, give it to them, REO led here, give it to them for free. Because the hardest part is to get the new customer. Keep that customer and say, hey, let's talk about this in 90 days and we'll see what you can pay then. But it is so much harder to get the new one on the platform than there is to keep the one that's there. So do whatever you have to do to keep them there. Give them a discount plan, let them do it for free. Whatever you need to do, they will become your greatest evangelist. So not only will they probably be a customer in 90 days, they're also going to tell everyone that you get it and you're on the team and that you understood what it meant to build community and to lean in for each other. And so that was my thought about my friend Chris Hively, was just that, you know, he does so much for so many other people. I've used this 5 times. What else could I do? I've thanked him a million times, but I bet I could do more. And so that's REO gave away their platform for 90 days to anyone who wanted it. And they're wise because they'll get new customers on there because they might have sticker shock from the moment. Also, I'm sure they've worked out deals with people who are already using it to keep them on there.
Sure. So applications open May 1st. How long is
they
the
opened
application? Yeah, how long is the application window open for? And what recommendations do you have to companies that are on the fence? We've talked about the ups and downs with the alumni companies. So
I would say the application period is May 1st to June 19th, and the website is 757accelerate.org. And you'll see on every single view that there's a box for apply now. And we have an application, so hopefully you will take the time to fill it out. The other thing is, you know, we always say for anybody who's not sure, you know, this is a contact sport. The more entrepreneurs we can touch, the happier we are. We do this because we care about the founders. Yes, we care about our program. Yes, we care about you growing. Yes, we care whether or not REO raises money to grow. But fundamentally, we care about entrepreneurs in Hampton Roads. So if you're not sure if you're a candidate, or you know you're not a candidate, but you want to talk about who else we might know who can help you, you can always reach out to me at Evans at 757accelerate.org. It's on the website. You know, for more information, click here, you'll get to one of us. We are so excited about, especially right now, since we can't touch or meet with anybody, we're so excited to hear about new ideas, new customers, new founders, and try to get you to a resource that will be the best fit for where you are in your journey. So I think, and you know, if you're already watching the show, then you're in good hands with Zack and Tim. But I would say those are places where we love to share what we've learned, share what other accelerators are doing, other ideation programming, things that we've found to be useful for folks that are on your own, you know, that are free resources that you can use.
So in a situation like yours, where it's an application, I look back to like when I was applying to college. I look back on when I had a job, if you will. And I look at those applications being a process where everyone looks the same. And so when you guys have a set of parameters, what can someone do to have a resume that actually is an anomaly that gets your attention when you're getting dozens, hundreds, or thousands of applications? Like, what can someone do to stand out? Or what's something that someone has done that made you go, huh, I need to look at that deeper?
I will tell you, you know, again, it's a human, I'm a person like everyone else, and anyone whom I've talked to who's asked questions about the application, just like when I was applying to college, I asked a lot of questions of anybody who would talk to me. I would highly recommend reaching out to one of us, to reaching out to one of our alumni, talking to anyone who will talk to you about an accelerator, about what it's good for, about why you think you're a fit. I'm happy to talk to anyone. So I would say ask questions. You can email or call Joe Weaver, REO, SVT, any of the companies that have been through, and you can find them on our website too. They're great resources to help you figure out what's useful and how to make yourself stand out. I think, you know, there's no doubt that coachability, hunger, hustle, activity, any activity that you can show, great advisors, that helps with coachability. One of the things we talked a lot about If you have advisors, that means you're already open to taking advice and hearing new perspectives on what you're already doing. So those are great aspects, professors that you've worked with, programs that you've been in, any of those kinds of things where you have done the work yourself to move your idea or your company down the road. We are always going to have an easier time accelerating something that's already moving.
I think that's so interesting too, where it's like reach out to individuals that are have been a part of it, right? I think so many people see something and they think that the process that needs to be there is to do exactly what they say. And it's like, well, maybe not, right? Because if you want to get, if you are 1 in 100, that means there's 99 other people that you're competing against. And so what can you do to go above and beyond to, be Buzz Lightyear, to go to infinity and beyond? I think that's incredibly valuable. And I think more people need to do that, whether applying to 757 Accelerate or not. I think it's something that most people will look at and say, oh, I'm just going to do the application. I'll do the movement. I'll do what's required. I'll check it off the box. And then, oh, why didn't they choose me? It's like, well, you didn't go above and beyond. And that above and beyond is that thing that I think gets recognized, and it can be incredibly valuable. And so I'm glad you said what you said there. Tim?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I like the anomaly reference.
Well, of course, we got to get that in there once a show. I mean, come on. Yeah. Buy your book now at ZackMillerSays.com/anomaly. No. So let's flash back to a couple years ago when you were building the brand associated with 75 Accelerate, right? I think if we really deep dive into the things that we do on a daily basis, they are brands that are a pretty long period of time long, right? So I don't know what vest or jacket you're wearing, but my guess is that company is decades old, right? I'm wearing a black t-shirt, and t-shirts have been a thing forever, right? And so like that frequency and longevity of remembrance from something from a brand perspective is so incredibly important. What did you do way back when to start establishing a brand around 757 Accelerate so that people would start to think about that even 3 years later? So like maybe someone 3 years ago heard about you guys, but now is being reminded of that today. Like, what were some of the things that you were doing to get that brand out there to be recognized from a consistent and frequent basis?
So, God, let me think about what we were doing back then. I guess what I would do is say we aligned ourselves with a really successful, we sit sister to 757 Angels, which is, a top 10 angel funding group in the country. So that's helpful. And if what you're trying to do is create community and a community of resources that are focused on founders, I think it's really important to align with the collaboration and the branding that had already been successful and was recognizable. The other thing was when we went to build 757 Accelerate, we tried to create a community of stakeholders. So we went to 6 cities. We got funding from 6 cities, 4 universities, behind the leadership of Town Bank. Those are the financial partners that made it possible. So what we tried to say is, look, we're an honest broker for the region. And that's how we want to always, that's our value. That's how we want to be seen. And so we tried to prove it, right? We tried to be the whole region and not what's in it for Norfolk or what's in it for Hampton, for example. And I'm not picking on them, but I'm just saying those are just 2 big cities that have come alongside and been incredibly supportive, even when all of the spoils were not in their community. And then we also put on our board. I mean, I have a 27-person board, way bigger than I would like, but both of you all are on it because you represent really impactful and important entrepreneur constituencies. So the entrepreneur is only as strong as the group of resources that can be offered and leveraged to support them. And if we keep trying to say, like, this is my turf, and you're either with me or against me in these sort of silos that we create, we're in all of our own way. So I think from a brand perspective, we tried to be regional, we tried to be an honest broker, and we've tried to be inclusive in the way of, 70% of our founders that have been through the program are underrepresented founders. So they're either women, people of color, or vets. Super proud of that. That's really important to me, not only statistically, but also personally. And then I would say what we've also tried to do is we have 3 things that we stand for. You'll see it. It's on the website all the time. we're entrepreneurs are at the center of what we do. We try to give before we get. And we're always consistently saying that this requires a long-term commitment. And while we may have to scrap and scream for every dollar for the next year when all of the resources are drying up for anything that is absolutely defined as essential, I can tell you the commitment to doing whatever we have to do to continue to add value to entrepreneurs for the next 2-5 years, that's what we're going to do, even if we have to pivot the offering, because we're super committed to this resource, this economic diversification effort. And I believe now more than ever, I mean, all the research shows that entrepreneurs are the ones that are going to pull us out of this economic crisis. And I'm not just selling that, I truly believe it.
What's a company that you're following not associated with the Accelerate program that you think is not to that kind of company that I mentioned at the very beginning, right? The Facebooks of the world, right? The Lisa Sleeps of the world, or maybe it is Lisa. What's a company that you're following? Doesn't have to be in the southeastern part of Virginia, but will have a global dominant brand that's not associated directly with 757 Accelerate.
That will have a global brand, or I think will be a successful company?
Global brand.
A global brand. I've been really focused on singles and doubles for the last month.
Well, like a company that you're following that not a lot of people. So I would say, the Impossible Burgers, the Beyond Meat brand, that would be the brand. And I mentioned them, but that would be the type of brand I'm looking at. Like someone that is maybe on quadrant 1, maybe quadrant 2 of a bell curve that's going to start getting some of those others, because I think that's what's important to kind of grasp the whole universe, if you will.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, I'm really following companies that are working on like the genetic in the pharma space, who are working on the genetic footprint for how medications can be delivered more effectively. So there's a couple of companies that are doing, Genomine is one of the ones that Nancy Gurdon helped start, but there's a couple of companies that are doing that work to make sure that you're not having to take like, say, 3 or 4 different kinds of medications that have, a 10-day on ramp and a 15-day off ramp, and you go through all that to find out that they don't work. Because I think that's one of the things is that if we can ever fix the healthcare system enough to stop benefiting more sick people, one of the things is to not over-medicate people as much. And I'm thinking about this a lot because my mom is older and has to take some medications, and the bumping around in the dark that we're doing without the care, because neither one of us is in the healthcare space. If we had more data on what kind of medications actually work for her to solve this thing, we're just trying so many things. And I think we're making it so much harder for her. So I think as the population ages and people get more demanding about how the healthcare is delivered, any of those companies, and there are 3 of them that I sort of, Flow, Genomine, the companies that are actually delivering on that data, I think will be really powerful.
Got it.
Tim?
Yeah, I am curious. So you talked about community, and that's a huge, huge aspect. How can people that aren't necessarily starting a business get involved with the larger mission of what we're trying to do here within Hampton Roads?
Right. I feel like we should all answer this question. I think attending events is a big one. Now, of course, that's a big bust right now. But I mean, right now it's listening to podcasts, it's connecting, it's asking questions, it's reaching out. It's adding to the discourse, right? Adding to and or asking questions of the people who are trying to build these community events, virtual events. So that, I think, any time that you can log in and be a part of anything we're trying to do, that really helps all of us. So right now it's, trying 2 times a week to go to some sort of virtual event that's in this community from which you can learn or to which you could add, I think would be a big step. I think coming to talking to other founders, reaching out to some of these guys like the Joe Weavers and Nate and the other guys that were in here and asking, number 1, how can I help? And number 2, what did you learn and what would you do if you were me? People love to share their experience, right? And they love to people, particularly right now, I think really want to feel helpful. So I think reaching out to other founders in the community. I think other ways to get involved are when we get back to normal, coming to the community events, coming to Start Peninsula, coming to any of those events and just seeing who's there and adding, we're trying to add density to any and all of these things. And the more hits we get, the better off we'll be. So I would say attending events, reaching out to founders and resources, and asking what you can do, or how, or asking questions about their evolution and what they would do if they were you.
Wonderful. If you guys are interested in applying or having questions or anything like that, head on over to 757accelerate.org, and on every single page, in every single corner, in the middle, all around, it says apply now. Be sure to apply now, and make sure to take the tip that Evans provided, saying don't just apply, reach out to other people, because other people that are associated with the group, with the business, because guess what? That will get their attention, and maybe look at your application a little bit.
And you'll spend your time more wisely, right? Your application will just be better because you took the time to learn. Imagine
that. Any closing thoughts or any questions for Tim and I before we close things down?
So I'm curious what brands you're following. But before you answer, I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for all the work you guys do for entrepreneurs. And thanks for putting 757 Accelerate on your Rolodex, and caring enough about what we're trying to do to expose us to your listeners. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm curious who you're following.
Tim, I'll let you go first, as I think.
Well, thank you, Evans, and thank you for all that you are doing as well. It's super important. And with everyone pitching in and working together, that's what makes all the difference. So it's, in my opinion, this is the most exciting times that we've had in our region, and I think that we're just getting started. So it's me. I am following brands, as many brands as I possibly can follow across Hampton roads. But to me, I mean, everybody loves an underdog story, and so I love companies that have the tenacity and just the pain tolerance. And we've touched on this already about just continuing to push through and defy the odds. And so everybody knows, I mean, these guys are a global brand already, but I am eager to listen to Elon is going to be on Joe Rogan today, so whatever part 2 has. But I mean, this guy's defied everybody. And so he's gone against the automotive industry. He's gone against the oil industry. He's fought everybody, and his pain tolerance is so strong. And he just continues to fight. And that's one of my inspirations.
So I knew he was going to say that, because
me too.
I'm not surprised.
I guess I wouldn't say I knew, but I guess.
But for me, like, I look at businesses as media brands, right? So historically, you look at the media as people associated with journalism, and I think that media has shifted from that, where it is still that kind of traditional stuff, but it's actually a lot more than that now. And so I look at companies that have built great media brands associated with them. And so you look at a company that almost 2 decades ago, in something like a Barstool Sports, and how they had rapidly grown. I think they just got acquired, or had a huge opportunity to be joined by some sort of gaming company, gaming as in gambling. But they went from a very local business that was focused on Boston sports, and have turned into a global juggernaut. And a lot of it had to do with creating media, creating YouTube content, creating content that people wanted. And so I think that's incredibly important. And then obviously Iron Man, I think those are 2 companies that have their own kind of core functions to them. But they also recognize that they always have to be 100% of the time on a marketing brand as well, from a media perspective. And I think that's what Elon and Tesla has done. And I think it's important that you be thinking about the distribution of media through all of this, because that's what we do. We consume media. And so those are the 2 that I would say.
Yeah. I mean, just the startup mindset of everything. I mean, and I'm going to jump back on the soapbox again with Elon, but I mean, for someone to go out on Twitter and repeatedly ask for, send me your most critical feedback on how we can improve our product. This is stuff that we're teaching founders every single day, and they're 12 years old, and he's still asking for that same feedback. And that's why they have the best products out there. And so he leads by example, and I love it. I can't say enough about the guy.
And it's not often that a guy can be associated with companies twice and be that successful. That's not very common.
Well, I mean, everybody loves a serial entrepreneur, right? But I think with his particular style, it's challenging because people are sort of like, you love him or you hate him, right? There's not really he makes it hard to be somewhere in between, at least in his public persona. Who knows what it's like to be around him. But anyway, I just think that's one of those things that you prove that you can take those body blows, sell a company, move on, get out of the CEO seat when the time comes. Any and all of those things are really, really powerful and easy. I mean, they put you so ahead of the curve when round 2 comes.
And you can put yourself in those situations and learn from him,
Yep.
right? And figure out the things that you like that he does and that you don't, and then figure out how to do that on your own. And I think that's incredibly powerful. So we thank you for your time today, Evans. If you guys haven't yet and are interested, make sure to go to 757accelerate.org and apply now. Applications are open for a few more days or a lot more days, however many days.
Oh, yeah, till June 19th.
Till June 19th. And if you watch this after June 19th, then apply for, cohort 4 or whatever. Keep following along the journey.
You can always call. You never know. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Evans. Tim, always good to see you. And the question I will leave all of you with is, will I have a haircut by the next time that we do this show? The answer is probably no. Probably no. Appreciate you guys' time today. And see y'all next time. Peace and pancakes, y'all. Later.
So long, everyone.